Hey, welcome to the workshop, everybody. My name is C.F. Roberts. If you've watched CAT for any length of time, then you've probably seen something I produced. A couple of things people might not know I produced. I do a show called The Kane Interviews. I do another show called On the Air with Richard S. Drake. I never appear on those shows. I'm just kind of like I direct, I edit. I'm kind of like Mr. Behind the Scenes guy. There's another show I do. It's a show called Mondo Pazzo, which you may occasionally see me on, and that's a show that is produced and starred by my wife, my wife stars and produces that show, and she kind of allows me to come on and kind of shoot my mouth off every now and again. Probably the show everyone knows me for, most people know me for, is The Abbey of the Lemur, which is probably more pertinent to this workshop. In addition to having done stuff for CAT for about the last 10 years, I'm an award-winning writer and poet. I am a former small magazine publisher and a visual artist, and have sang lead for a rock band. My interest in First Amendment issues, probably started with me as a kid when lots of people were raising squabbles about the violent cop shows I used to like, and I was kind of bugged by that. Later on, when I became a big rock music fan and whatnot, Tipper Gore and Susan Baker formed their anti-music group, the PMRC, Parents Music Resource Center, and started lobbying for the labeling of records that contained violent, pornographic, occult, or whatever content. Yeah, kind of interesting thing about the censorship movement in the 80s, the music censorship movement in the 80s, is that a lot of the records that a lot of people lobbied to censor were actually political in content, not pornographic. But that's kind of neither here nor there. In 1996, I can't remember whether it was Bob Dole or Pat Buchanan who coined the phrase culture war, but they were the people that they coined the phrase or supported the phrase culture war, and that pretty much got the ball rolling. And I don't know, I've kind of been a big fighter on the other side of the culture war ever since. And it's kind of always been a bug in my brain. But anyway, this workshop is going to pertain to one of two groups of people primarily, and the first group is producers. Now I'm talking either people who are already involved with CAT, producing shows for CAT, and or independent producers. You don't have to necessarily be involved in CAT, or people who maybe are kind of looking at this community access thing and maybe want to be involved in it. And in either case, I don't know, perhaps your stuff leans toward the risque, or perhaps, I don't know, maybe you've been interested in, I don't know, maybe you've shot this hard-hitting documentary or something like that, and you want to know, you're fairly sure that you're not ready for prime time. Maybe your stuff's a little too hard-hitting for prime time. In any respect, you want to know, what are my rights? What kind of trouble could I get into? How can I stay out of trouble? And I'm a good person to ask about that. Mm-hmm. Or you may be somebody who's been up flipping through the channels at midnight, past midnight, whatever, and seen something absolutely awful. And, maybe you kind of questioned, I don't want this kind of thing going on in my community. I don't want people seeing this. What happens? I don't know. What can I do about this? How can I get this off the air, get it out of my community, etc., etc., etc.? And either case, if you're thinking about either of those questions, I'm a good person to ask, because people who tried to get me off the CAT airwaves for years, and they've all failed miserably. so I can give it to you from both angles. If you see something on the air that you don't like and you don't think it should be on there on the CAT airwaves, well, CAT's entire emphasis, CAT's entire message, its entire
Mission.
way of being, its entire mission is First Amendment, free speech, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, unless you're doing something illegal, there's very little anyone can do about taking you off the air. And your best recourse, if you want to get something off the air on CAT, is to push for the notion that what's on the air is illegal. Usually that falls under the realm of obscenity. There are other forms of illegal speech. Slander and libel is one. Incitement to riot, anything like that would be another one. Obscenity is the big one. Obscenity is the one most people would go for. And so there is the off chance that you could see something, think it's obscene, and possibly get it off the air. A caveat I want to throw out at this point is if you see something on the air you don't like, don't blame CAT. And I think CAT would much appreciate me saying this. CAT deal with everything on a First Amendment basis. I want to show you something real quick. I'll be right back.
Stand by.
Yeah, we're not really dealing with that, but that's
it is.
probably
It is
good.
illegal for
Yeah.
that.
This is a little item that when you produce a show for CAT, everybody signs one of these. This is called a cable cash request form, or as it's known around CAT, it's CCRF. And you sign a little bit of information that says, I hereby promise to indemnify and hold harmless CAT, its staff, management board, the city of Fayetteville, and cable operator for any legal actions resulting from cable cast of this new program, including but without limitation to any violation of state, local, or federal laws relating to obscenity, libelous, slanderous statements, unauthorized invasion of privacy, materials protected by U.S. law, and or materials contrary to local, federal, or state laws, regulations, procedures, or policies. In other words, if you're producing a show for CAT, basically you sign that form and you hold them legally irresponsible. You hold yourself legally responsible for any laws you may break. Therefore, it's all on you. And it's important to note that. A lot of producers may ask, why should I worry about this BS? I know a lot of producers who have had the attitude of, why can't I just make my stuff? I just want to make my stuff in peace, not be bothered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the prime example I can give you for this, well, people may hold you responsible. Now, in the 1996 presidential elections, Pat Buchanan and Bob Dole, one or another of them coined the phrase culture war. Another one of them kind of picked up that phrase and used it. I hate when that happens. Culture war. And we're in the middle of culture war today, and lots of people have made a lot of hay about that. And as a producer, you may be asking yourself, well, okay, under this supposed culture war, et cetera, what kind of trouble can I get into? Well, culture war, as it applies to CAT, and as it applies to CAT producers, and the consequences we face, probably the big one we're focusing on right now is obscenity. And a lot of people will accuse a lot of producers and people who make shows, do videos or whatever, of being obscene. And people are real iffy on obscene, but one thing you need to know is that legal obscenity is a crime. And some penalties you can face for legal obscenity is up to a year in prison, thousands of dollars in fines, and not a good thing. Feel like dealing with that? You need to ask yourself that question. And you may be asking yourself, can I get accused of obscenity if what I do isn't illegally obscene? And the answer is yes. It's happened to me, it's happened to a lot of other people, and that can run itself as far as consequences up to investigation and or prosecution, and I have seen this happen before. Do you want to face prosecution for what you do? And if you are complaining about a show being obscene, you need to ask yourself, are you prepared to prosecute someone? Do you think that what someone has done on CAT is so bad that you actually want them to go to jail for what they do? Because that is the penalty. And of course, when you're talking legal procedures, you're talking lots and lots of time and money and a court and whatnot. But the main gist of my discussion tonight is going to revolve around the Miller versus California Obscenity Test. And this procedure was written in 1973 by the United States Supreme Court. And this is the litmus test for legal obscenity, what I'm going over today. And this is a big one to note. If you're a CAT producer or a film producer who wants to show their stuff on CAT, or if you are someone who is offended by the stuff you see on CAT, if you want to prove something is obscene, ultimately it's going to have to go to a court of law. And Miller versus California is the litmus test that they are going to be judging it by. And you need to know this litmus test. Now, a lot of people will read this litmus test. A lot of people will maybe read about half of it and go crazy from there. A lot of people may kind of read the whole thing. But Miller versus California is the national standard for judging whether something is legally obscene. And if it is legally obscene, it is illegal and it can be banned by the government. There are 3 steps to the Miller test, and I'm going to outline all of them for you. Okay, first step. That an average person applying contemporary, local, community standards must find that the work taken as a whole, note that term, as a whole, I love that part of it, appeals to the prurient interest. Now, what we're saying with that is basically that the intent of the work in question, be it video or whatever, has to be to, well, basically give you a happy. It basically has to stimulate you sexually, and that has to be the absolute goal of the piece. A little caveat on that. Some court language determines this as, it's not just regular stimulation. I don't know, it's not just like, say, something you might see on Sex on the City or, say, something on HBO. It's got to be something that stimulates kind of a shameful and morbid interest in sex, not just the kind that includes more normal lust. And in other words, it's got to be something that you'd be deathly afraid to take home to mom and dad, I guess. Local community standards. A lot of people are very excited when they hear that term, local community standards. In other words, what I've heard many times in the past is, well, they made a lot of those kinds of things in, say, LA or New York or whatever, but we're not going to have it here. We used to have those things in Dallas, and they basically tarred and feathered them and ran out of town on a rail, Probably the best example I can think of as far as local community standards and the sentiment behind them is, Shannon and I both know this because we are both small magazine publishers. And when she and I were publishing small magazines, we both saw this legal case unfold in front of us involving a young man in Pinellas County, Florida named Mike Diana. And he did this little comic zine called Boiled Angel. And he was prosecuted and found guilty of obscenity. And the judge, and I believe his name was Stuart Ham, I could be wrong on that, but I believe that was his name. He had a quote on the standards of Pinellas County when he sentenced Mike Diana to the year probation / house arrest or whatever it was that he was on. And he said, I believe it was something like the clubs of New York and the bathhouses of San Francisco are not the same thing standards-wise as Pinellas County, blah, blah, blah. Is that more or less correct? That's pretty much correct.
As I remember it, one of the interesting things that the judge in that case tried to do was to not only assign the usual punitive kinds of measures that you'd think, jail time or a fine or something of that nature. Did he not command Mike Diana to stop writing?
He wouldn't allow him to draw.
He couldn't draw for a year, and how
he couldn't draw pictures for a year.
He couldn't draw pictures.
And his basically his parole or his probation officer was permitted in the space of that probation to pretty much tear Mike's house apart and look at anything he did and decide whether it was appropriate or not. Now, and eventually he went through his probation, got through it, and left Pinellas County. But you see, when people get excited about the concept of community standards, and they say, okay, well, yeah, we're not going to have that Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York mentality down here. Down here we know better, blah, 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 blah. And, Judge Ham, I think, stated that sentiment very well with his judgment. But, anyway, so a lot of people get very excited when they hear the term local community standards.
It might be interesting to know how he came under prosecution in the first place, which was, correct me if I'm wrong, but this guy was secretly sneaking his company, he worked somewhere and was using their Xerox to make his magazine. Well, he left something on there, and some woman came in the next morning and found it and went nuts. And so that's what it was. So I believe that's how that came about.
Something like that. And it's kind of like, I don't know realistically, because you and I have seen the magazine in question.
Yes.
And I'm not sure how I could have judged in those standards. It was a tough call. I think.
I don't think that it was particularly prurient, offensive. Oh yeah,
It was
to just about any life form. And what it consisted of mainly was somewhat crude drawings coupled with strong anti-religious sentiment, and I think it covered just about all your basic taboos, maybe necrophilia, incest, and all kinds of things. And it was vulgar, yeah, but Florida has been, especially at that time, it was they were also prosecuting 2 Live Crew, and it was notoriously harsh. And so I don't know if that case would have played out anywhere but Florida, because they were just kind of the whole state seemed to be in that kind of a mood around that time, and I don't know if that would have made it through court in a somewhat more liberal state. He was just in the wrong place to be.
Yeah, well, I know kind of on a national level, he kind of became almost like a cause célèbre after a while.
Oh yeah, he was basically a martyr for the cause. Whether people liked his work or not, even people that didn't like his work got behind. They got behind him in terms of suggesting that censorship is wrong, no matter what the reason.
Yeah.
And I would personally tend to agree with that. I don't think he should have been prosecuted. I think if he should have been in trouble for anything, it was pilfering the office Xerox. His boss might have something to say about that.
Okay, so we find ourselves here going to Miller versus California, Step 2. The definition of obscenity does not stop at the first step. A lot of people would like it to. But the work in question must depict or describe in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by applicable state law. And if what you're seeing on, say, Cat, if what you're seeing some independent producer create isn't any worse than anything you might find on, say, HBO or Skinamax or anything like that, well, that law doesn't apply. Because, like I said, obscenity is illegal, and if you're seeing it on the higher tier kind of premium channels, chances are it's not illegal. A lot of porn actually is not illegal. And in polite company, if we were to take apart offensive descriptions, offensive sexual conduct described, specifically defined by applicable state law, well, this workshop is being taped for Cat, and it's being taped in such a respect that hopefully it will show during all hours of the day. Henceforth, it's more or less PG. And being that this workshop is PD, I can't read you applicable state law. It's got to be pretty nasty. Basically, we're talking, I don't know, big, huge close-up shots of members rubbing together, and it can't be much else. I mean, it's got to be pretty much in your face. That's all it is. There can't be a whole lot of content to it beside that. You know, the intent of the producer, author, whatever, has to more or less be sexual stimulation. It's got to be pretty nasty stuff.
How many applicable state laws are there? Are there very many?
There are quite a few. I've been shown some of it here and there, and it's pretty far-reaching and pretty graphic. It's it's pretty nasty stuff it involves. So really graphic, in-your-face detail. But step 3, and I've shown you local community standards. And the first 2 steps pretty much apply to local community standards. How an average person would define local community standards. The third step, and this is the step I love, but it goes beyond local community standards as the way an average person would define them, and talks about the way an average person would define them, or a reasonable person as opposed to an average person. That would include a reasonable person in New York or San Francisco or Las Vegas. That would include possibly someone who has a knowledge of art history and theory, in which case I'm home free. Now, Miller Test Step 3 talks about SLAPS values. And yeah, this is the part of it I love. And this is the part of it I win every time, anytime anyone accuses me of obscenity. Serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific values. And basically, in order to prove that something is obscene, you have to prove that it lacks all of these. In order to prove yourself not obscene, you have to prove that you've got some of these. And people have accused me of obscenity. People have actually brought me in front of the cat board for obscenity. And they claim that what I produced lacked all of these, and I pretty much came out and said, well, no, you can't really say that because, first of all, you've got a 15-minute block here that's nothing but political statements. You've got a half-hour block here that is all artistic because it's got this, it's got this, it's got this. It's edited this way, shows this, describes this, promotes local music, and so on and so forth, and so you can't deny that that's artistic. You got a little 5 to 10 minute block here that is pretty much just solidly political, and so that argument failed. And of course, all things considered, it's not a little group of angry people in the back of a Pizza Hut that define whether something is has SLAPS values. It's a judge and a jury. But if you want to take it that far. But just basically, it still comes down to a judge and jury. But if you want to argue that something's obscene, well, you better think twice about second guessing the person who's producing it, and you better do your homework. As far as cat obscenity issues, I know of several. There was one that kind of predates me. And it was produced by a staffer here back many, many moons ago. And it was a show, I believe it was called All American TV. And I believe what the producer did, and yes, he was a staffer here, I believe that what he did was he took several seconds of a hardcore porno movie and spliced it into his show just to see if anyone would notice. Well, guess what? People did. And and he wound up losing his job and wound up losing his producer privileges. Should he have? I don't know. I wasn't there to judge. Catherine Sherrills, who's the big expert on these things, has said no, it was not obscene. No, he shouldn't have lost his producer privileges of it. And I might personally question that judgment, but I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I can't tell you. My own show, The Abbey of the Lemur, came under fire a couple of times. 1998, we came under fire for doing all kinds of crazy stuff involving a pig head, which we bought at a local grocery store, and using that as a prop, and nudity. It wasn't actual nudity, it was implied nudity, but several people thought we crossed the line, and they complained about it. They made official complaints. Some people have said that our show in 2003 was the only time or the first time anyone had actually gone through the complaint process. That's actually incorrect. They have before that, and they did with our 1998 show. And it was pretty much put to the Miller test, and pretty much said no, it didn't go anywhere near obscenity. And was it objectionable? Yes. Was it indecent? Yes. But no, it didn't cross any obscenity lines, and that was judged by the cable board, which was kind of the forerunner to what we now have, the telecom board. In 2003, we had a show. We did a live show, and it was complained about, and they brought it to the CAT board, and the CAT board decided it was also not obscene. That wouldn't even make it as far as a court of law. Nobody would want to tackle it. And if you want to know what kind of trouble you can get into, a friend of mine did a show called Billy Nabob Bubba several months after that, and that particular show was actually investigated by the police for obscenity. And likewise, they found, no, this doesn't even come close to the obscenity law. It was, in their opinion, pretty stupid, but they didn't actually find it remotely obscene.
That was actually the headline on that, right?
Yeah.
There was a newspaper headline. It said, Billy Nabob Bubba found stupid, but not obscene.
And I could question that, actually. It was pretty intelligent, and actually it kind of went back to earlier obscenity charges, and was kind of his way of that producer's way of calling city officials onto the mat and saying, you guys are full of it. And unfortunately, they didn't have enough insight to realize that. But
stupidity isn't illegal, though.
No, stupidity is not illegal.
Okay.
Or the current administration would be out of business.
Yeah. But okay. Let me see. I want to backtrack a sec here.
Is it okay if I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you know of any other cases in the CAT history, and Jim, you might also know this too, because, or maybe not, okay, that where shows were complained on that weren't outing?
I believe
or any of the
Cream Corn got complaints.
Yeah, or any of the VDA, like
I don't know that it
older
did.
shows.
Or was that more of a radio
I think that's
thing?
more of a
Okay, we're talking about a roughly 3-minute film that I did with a guy named Jet Black, and he directed and edited the thing. I just appeared in it. And apparently it aired here, and the next morning people woke up to radio DJs talking about how horrible this program was. And I don't know if that even made it as far as the actual complaint process.
I mean, yeah, as far as older shows though, like in the 90s, do you know of any other? Because that's the first time I heard of All American TV. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, that's as far back as I know. And I don't know a whole lot other than that. Somebody with a longer institutional memory than me might be able to tell you something. Lots of shows, there have been a lot of shows that people have maybe called into and said, I'm upset about this show, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But they haven't gone through the official process, which is you complain in writing to the CAT manager, and if that doesn't work, you complain in writing to the CAT board. And if you're not satisfied with their answer, you complain in writing to the telecom board. And the city has basically put all those steps in place so that they don't have to deal with this kind of thing.
Oh.
But I don't know. Whether you're a producer who's producing programming that some people might find offensive, or whether you're offended by programming and want to complain about it, and think it may be obscene, and think it may be breaking the law, probably the best thing you can do in either of those cases is learn to argue effectively for your point. Do your homework. Understand these laws that make something illegal. A good example I can come up with is, if you're familiar at all with the issue they had like a year or two ago regarding books in the Fayetteville school libraries, and I did follow that issue quite a bit because First Amendment censorship type issues are very big with me. I followed that issue, and they took it to a town meeting in the Fayetteville school library, in the Fayetteville High School. And a lot of folks on either side get up to speak. And the one thing I hear from the side that was for banning or restricting the books in question is they say that, well, the sides were stacked and the anti-censorship group all had their people lined up to get up and basically defeat this bill, and honest good folks who cared about what their kids read didn't have a chance. Well, the fact of the matter is, the other side argued their case very effectively. The other side didn't. And I was there, I was at the town hall meeting, and I witnessed all this. A good example, if you think something I do is obscene, and say you don't think it lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific values, you better be ready to come up and delineate all this and say, well, it doesn't lack literary or artistic or political value because it didn't have this, and this. Because I take this into consideration every time I produce a show. And I'm ready to come up and defend anything I produce on the level of this anytime it comes up. So if you want to take me to the mat on this, do your homework, because I eat people like you for breakfast. I'll do it every single time. I make it my business. I make it my mission in life to do so. The reason I make it my mission in life to do so is because of people like the comedian Lenny Bruce and the poet D.A. Levy, who basically died for their free speech. And that comes into account every time I do what I do. With the book issue, how they screwed up is they came down and say they had this in this book that they claimed was obscene or pornographic or filthy or whatever, and basically they came down and they said it's filth, it's pornography, it has no redeeming values, it's filth. And then a flood of other people came up and they said, no, this book does have values and does belong in the curriculum because it has this and this theme, it accomplishes this and this thing, it sends this message, has this plot point, this social merit, blah, blah, blah. And all the other side could do in recourse to that was get up and just keep flailing their arms helplessly and say it's filth. And so they completely lost the argument, and they had nothing really to do. Producers, I would say, if you are a producer for CAT and you're concerned that what you have might be iffy, and like I've stated before, just because your program isn't obscene, and maybe your program isn't obscene, doesn't mean that you may not be accused of obscenity and that you may not face the legal repercussions. What I would suggest to you is know the Miller test. It's your best defense. Use it to your advantage. Particularly this, if you factor slaps values into your program, it'll save you every time. That's my personal recommendation. People who think what they may be encountering is obscene, same thing. Just take it on, look at these laws, and be able to argue it effectively if you think something is obscene. And like I said, if the most you can do is just flail your arms and say there are dirty words, it's filth, you may not get very far. So really, really break that down. Know your info, know the Miller test, do your homework, argue effectively. If you really want to take this the whole 9 yards, be prepared to do so. If you really want to, if you really feel what you think is obscene, if you really feel something is obscene, be prepared to argue effectively, break it down and understand that it applies to those laws, or, regardless, do your homework. Producers, be prepared, because you may very well have to defend what you do, whether you feel it's justified or not. And I guess that's it. Questions?
I think it might be important to go back to when we're looking at the SLAPS test. It goes into another part of Miller versus California where it has to be taken as a whole. The 15 minutes you're complaining about may possibly lack in some values to you.
Mm-hmm.
But if that show contains something that has any artistic merit whatsoever, then you're going to lose your case, you're going to lose your argument.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important because people sometimes hone in on
They'll hone in on one specific part.
one specific thing and they won't actually take the thing as a whole. So if you want to label something as obscene, you have to look at the whole thing. In other words, it's not just the 10 minutes you caught at 3 in the morning.
Right.
You have to get the whole show and rewind and sit down and have an honest look at it.
Anybody else?
Well,
Thank you.
That was wonderful.
Yes.
That's really cool. I didn't know that about because it's this. I guess because maybe my administration or just maybe things are a little more organized, or I don't know. It's just like because I was familiar with all the complaints about the VDA stuff in the past few years, but I didn't know about the All-American.
That was a long time ago.
Who was that? Who's the producer of that?
I forget the name of the guy who produced it.
Uh-huh.
I know he was a staffer here,
Yeah.
and I believe that was in the Cat era. It was not.
It wasn't the focus.
It wasn't Focus. I think it was Cat,
Mhm.
but
Huh.
I believe he did lose his job over that, and also
Oh.
lost his producer
Oh,
privileges.
Laws are applicable.
That's not difficult at all. You just have to look them out, but it's they're pretty graphic. Like I said, if I wanted to keep a PG program, I couldn't actually read them out loud to you. But
But you don't have to go searching through all the.
no, it's not heavy minutia. You could probably look it up online. I believe I looked at the time that we were facing our big obscenity charge, we were looking at a couple of different things about it, and the CAT board president at the time gave me a couple of different sheets, kind of dealing with what we were looking at as far as step 2 and the applicable state laws. None of which it even really approached.
Well, I like what you're saying about whether you deem it to be obscene or not. Somebody may find it that way.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it didn't go through the courts. When cream corn was labeled obscene, that actually, not much surprises me in the world. That did.
Yeah.
And I didn't, it was weird. It was surrealistic. It was quirky. It was possibly gross, but obscene. No, that, and the next thing I know, I've got a TV news crew knocking on my door.
Yeah.
And
Really?
and I welcome the chance to try explaining myself. But there's no way, had that been taken any farther, there's no way it would have been found obscene.
Yeah. Well, I don't think so either. And but one thing, yeah, I mean, as far as people asking what kind of trouble could they find themselves in, well, back at the time we did that particular episode of Abbey of the Lemur, and cream corn was another deal, and it kind of fell into that because you achieved a certain amount of say about it, but well, what we found out was basically any number of movers and shakers, any number of influential people in the community came out and said, hey, we're trying to sell these $100,000 condos here in town, and we're trying to bring in all these young executives, and what's going to happen if they see this? You know, our real estate sales are going to plummet.
And that's what it ultimately comes down to, like so many things that we have talked about.
Yeah.
It's
City officials.
It's class issues.
Yeah, it's class issues. And city officials can't come out and say this, but they'll find other people who will say it for them. They'll get friends in the media who will come out and do stories about it. And that all happens, and so you could get a lot of attention from. From a number of people who come out and say those things.
Are you still recording stuff for the workshop? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I thought you were done. You said you were done.